Title of this talk that it could be on the agenda. You'll see it says stakeholder engagement, and that could be misconstrued to be like a militaristic confrontation. That's not the case here, but in some respects, going back in time in New York, that was how my predecessors certainly would characterize our public involvement. So I just wanted to briefly, Andy and I basically wanted to update you on some efforts that we're taking in LOC to improve our relationship building with stakeholders. And it's been a bit of an evolution, and one of the greatest wake-up calls for me was the first public meetings I attended in the province of Ontario surrounding St. Lawrence River Fish Community Objectives Development back in 1999, and I was absolutely astounded at the level of courtesy and respect that folks who showed up in Canada at those meetings. They were very, very respectful of their civil servants, and there was no great questions, very polite, quite a bit different than things have been in New York, and admittedly, it's possible that the agencies, to some degree, have contributed to that kind of behavior. So, Andy and I have taken it upon ourselves to make sure that, as going forward, that we're trying to build relationships here with stakeholders, and it's based on building trust, and you can only build trust by having transparency, and that transparency also, the fundamental foundation in this is doing a better job in communicating science. And I think most all of us would agree that we don't necessarily do a good job in that. And there's not a lot of help out there available to us either. We've been trying to reach out on that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that more. So just a few kind of a past present type thing here. So in Ontario, folks from Ontario are well aware of the FMZs, or Fish Management Zone Councils, and so that's the primary tool that Andy uses to build relationships with his stakeholders, a variety of members who represent a diverse interests, open lake, tributary, environmental side of things, charter representation, same type of thing we do in New York as well. Very effective. Andy, I think, has taken that to a greater level, where he actually gets out and dines with these people, fishes with these people, and truly gets, rolls up sleeves and actually gets to know these people well, and has actually develops a close personal relationship with a lot of members of his council. And I think to me, it's readily apparent the benefits of the investment that he's made there. Another initiative that Andy has undertaken was the development of these salmon symposium. We've had two now on a 5-year cycle held at Port Credit. The ministry does not itself organize these. These are organized by Port Credit Angler Association. Yeah, partnership there. Incredibly successful events, very well attended on Saturdays, 350 plus attendees. Brings in speakers from our agency, from New York, from USGS, and the last symposium we brought Frank Christ, who's a stakeholder advisor to Michigan DNR, and then also local anglers give presentations and whatnot. Just John Detmers has presented at those as well. Extremely successful, and we've had some New York stakeholders show up at those meetings as well. And now we're working, we've asked Jesse LaPan from New York State Sea Grant to work with the Lake Ontario Sport Fishing Promotion Council in New York State, which is county tourism reps, to see if we can't have some of these salmon symposia in New York State as well, kind of bouncing back and forth across the border. So those have been great. So third item is what we call our State of the Lake Ontario Fisheries meetings. New York State has been conducting 3 public meetings every spring, going back to the mid-1990s, so immediately following the 1993 stocking cuts, we started to go out and have 3 meetings, and those unfortunately devolved because they just became, the agenda started to grow, and technical presentations started to consume upwards of 2.5 hours of airtime with heavy technical information, and we've pulled back from that and tried to limit what we present at those meetings now, and in advance of the meeting we prepare a bulleted summary of our annual report so that people can see the highlights across a range of things such as lake trout restoration, sea lamprey control, and whatnot. But at the meeting, we limit the presentations just a few topics, but then leave a lot of open time for folks to engage and ask us questions on other topics that we didn't formally present on. So I think we're doing a better job there, but we have a long way to go. So enter the new era, and this was, in my mind, this was a bit of an experiment in developing what we call our binational Lake Ontario stakeholder group. It was Andy's brainchild to bring together stakeholders from both New York and Ontario, and we did this in advance of our discussions surrounding the need for reducing predator demand in the lake in 2017. So we organized this group with John Detmer's help. So John has been basically our mediator in this process. And we have a dozen New York and a dozen Ontario stakeholders on this panel, so to speak. And we've met with them personally several times and had several conference calls, and we'll be meeting with them again very shortly after we have the results of the 2018 bottom trawl survey for alewife. But I think John and Andy would agree that this is, it's gone past, in my mind, the experimental stage. I'd say it's firmly entrenched. I think it's been successful, something we want to continue to engage in. It's obviously much easier for the Lake Ontario Committee since we only have to do this with 2 jurisdictions. But now moving to some more recent efforts in New York State. The Salmon River is our most heavily fished water in New York State, as I mentioned yesterday. We convened a fisheries management focus group for the Salmon River. Same thing in terms of getting a broad array of interest at the table. This time making sure we had local business people at the table in addition to just regular catch and release fly fishermen, Chinook anglers who tend to harvest, steelhead fishermen, people with an interest in Atlantic salmon restoration. Another very highly successful effort, I would say. We met with them for the first time in the fall. We had given them a draft management plan in advance. So we came to that first meeting to talk about the management plan, and since that time, we've revised that, and it's now out for public comment. So, and out of that, we're going to develop a specific Atlantic salmon restoration plan for the Salmon River. We're doing a similar effort now for the open lake anglers. And this fisheries management focus group for Lake Ontario is basically, we've got 16 anglers, 8 that represent tributary angling interests, and 8 from the open lake interest. And typically those 2 groups have not seen eye to eye on management issues. Now the major difference in this effort is we've typically gone to our anglers and said, what type of regulations are you looking for? And it was pretty naive, and given the fact that fish management, our primary tools are stocking and regulations, and yet here we were going out to our anglers and saying, what do you want to see for regulations? So we're basically saying, we're giving you input on what tools, one of our major tools here. So it's kind of a backwards way of thinking, and now we're changing that. So we're going out to the stakeholders and saying, what fisheries management outcomes do you want to see? Tell us what values, what is most important to you in your sport fisheries. Don't tell us how you want us to get there. Tell us what you want, and then we'll discuss a range of options that we could use to try to get there, as well as the unforeseen consequences of those actions or potential pitfalls. So that's a new approach. That one will not, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but it will not result in a management plan, since it's guided by our LOC Fish Community Objectives document. So we'll be meeting again with those folks in April to discuss options that we have put together for addressing their fisheries management outcomes. The refined messaging in our science communication, I talked about how we are trying to get better at science communication, and I think we've done a great job on that with the binational panel. We're trying to limit the amount of detail, the number of things that we're dealing with that group. I'm not saying we've perfected it by any means. We need help and we have a long way to go there, but we're certainly trying to not inundate people with 20 different graphics that they can't understand. We're trying to, there are a lot of stakeholders where there's too much talk about CUEs and recruitment and year class strength, a lot of terms that people still are throwing out there to stakeholder groups thinking that they understand these things. And I think working with a few stakeholders and talking about these personally, it was clear that they didn't understand those things. And so we recognized that we needed to work with these folks and that our presentations need to assume that there is no technical foundation that we're building on. So every time we go out, we have our presentations crafted to basically try to walk them through step by step on the information that we're getting, being aware of the audience and whether or not it seems like they're getting it or not before we move on. I think it's been very successful. I think the greatest example of that is this last bullet, where we're seeing more balanced conversations on the discussions blogs, where we actually have some people who are understanding what we're trying to convey about the status of the adult alewife population right now and stocking levels, and some people are actually engaging when other stakeholders are bashing the agencies. We've got stakeholders who are actually refuting some of the misinformation that's out there. I think that's a clear sign that things are going better. So we will be, once we have our, as I said, our 2018 bottom trawl surveys, we're going to be busy again this summer, regardless of the results of that survey, following very extensive public outreach during 2016 and 2017. 2018 is going to be a very busy year, no question. Another aspect that I think is just incredible is the receptivity of our vessel captains and crew to these ride-alongs, and Brian Weidel was big on this with USGS. We now have people signing up to get out on one of the 3 research vessels during the alewife bottom trawl cruise, and it's gaining in popularity. And again, it's, people get to spend the day with Weidel, and Weidel's such a, introvert. It's tough to get him to, but after spending a day with Weidel on the boat, folks they learn a lot. Again, it's relationship building, and again, transparency. People are seeing some of the problems. They see how hard these folks are working on the vessel to get these data, and better understanding of what's going on, better trust building, great stuff. So with that, I'll take any questions.